Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to paint a pomegranate in colored pencil. I'm trying out a set of 24 Koh-i-Noor pencils that I picked up for about 25 bucks to put them through their paces here. And I hope you enjoyed this time lapse. We're going to start off by sketching with a yellow ochre pencil on some Stonehenge paper. Now this came in my Smart Art box this month, and I was really excited to try it with colored pencils since I've heard such great things about using this paper with this medium. And I'm just sketching on, probably a little bit darker than I typically would so that the camera will pick it up, but I like to go with colors that are similar to what I'm going to color the image with. So I'm doing these leaves with a kind of a sap green like color. I did the pomegranate with a yellow ochre because you see that color in the pith and in the skin of the fruit. And then I'll switch over to kind of like a Bordeaux or burgundy red to do the little seeds of pomegranate, so I won't have to fight with those colors later on. Now to put a nice straight table ledge here, I'm just going to use a ruler and use the grid on my cutting mat there that I've taped down to. Now this is where the tedious part starts. I decided I wanted to try some colored pencil layering here, and I wanted to try blending it out with solvent because that's something that people are typically pretty interested in when they're using colored pencils. And I was preparing to do my Koh-i-Noor colored pencil review at this point. That review will be up on my channel on Monday if you want to check it out. And when I'm doing pieces for review, I often will just try to stick to the colored pencil and not do mixed media because I kind of want to see what the pencils will do on its own. But I'm telling you what, after probably about half an hour doing that background, I was so wishing I just grabbed a marker and filled it in because it was tedious. But we do get a really nice look at the end. Now I'm not putting any pressure on these pencils. These pencils are quite hard feeling and dry feeling, but they don't take any pressure to apply to the paper, especially when you're doing this layering technique and you're going to use solvents. So if you have pencils and you don't use them because they fatigue your hand and your arm when you're using them, or you have arthritis, try coloring lightly, putting in layers, and then using some solvent because you may find that will give you the look that you're after without the strain. Now it does take a little bit longer, so I'm going to warn you there. Another thing you could do is do your background in watercolors and then layer up your pencil, and that's how I prefer to work typically, but I just wanted to see what I could do with these pencils. Now I did go in with an electric eraser to clean up the edges of my pomegranate where I'd gotten a little loosey-goosey with my background coloring. Since I am holding the pencil at the end for lighter pressure, I don't have as much control. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't grip it too strongly at the tip and then end up leaving like streaks and marks. Now I'm using a filbert brush and some Gamsol, which is an odorless mineral spirits, to dissolve the purple, blue, and black pencil that I put there. It just gives you a richer color than using one solid color on its own. And you can layer more color on top if you apply your solvent and you realize that it looks totally wimpy and totally wasn't worth the amount of time that you put into it. So layer on, my friends. Keep on layering until you feel like it's done. I'm not sure exactly how much time I put in at this point. I would say probably a good half hour. It doesn't seem like it should be. Maybe not that long. I've sped this up 600% and we're about 3 minutes in, so you can do the math. I can't do that math in my head right away. So I'm adding some deeper shadows here at the bottom of the kind of behind the table ledge area just to give it a little bit of depth. And I am working in small, low pressure circles. So I just want to keep my strokes fairly uniform and just put out an even coating. And you'll see that it goes pretty quickly. It goes pretty quickly when you're doing that. I realized I'm going to use solvent again for this, so I actually don't even need to do the circles. I can be just, scribbling basically. That's the benefit you have using solvent. If you're not going to use solvent, you would want to really take care with your coloring here. You'd want to go in your small ovals or circles to lay down an even application so that when you do see the grain of the paper, it's a nice kind of velvety even effect that you're getting there. And then after you've got that laid down, go ahead in with some solvent. This time don't use as much, you're not going to need it. And look at how you get a much more opaque and full coverage with your pencils. And you still can see all those colors that we put in there as they merge together. It just gives you a nice rich look. Now if you had just done, say you had the full set of, I think they have 144 colors now. Let's say you had the full set of colors and you just found like a black grape color. That's a Prismacolor shade, but you know what I mean, something like that. And you just went ahead and just did it all really thickly with that color, it would be similar in value, but you wouldn't have those undertones that you get when you're using several colors and mixing them together. So you can do either, but that's the reason. Well, I also mix those colors because I didn't have a very big set of pencils here, but there's a reason to go with a limited palette because you can bring up more complex colors that way. I'm going to pretty much do the same thing here with a tabletop, and the reason I like to get my backgrounds in first is because when I go over with my focal objects, the color pencils are opaque enough that I can layer up a little bit, so it'll give me a nice clean edge when I do it this way. I am being careful not to like go into my my focal objects that much, but I'd rather overlap them slightly than leave a gap or a halo around them. So keep that in mind when you're working. It's kind of like if you were working in acrylic paint, you're kind of building back to front. I'm going in with a black for my shadows. Now, if I had a larger set of pencils, I might have used like a darker brown, but I'm using what I have here, and I've already used the black in the background, so there's no problem using it here as well. I find that as long as you take a color and you use it several places, you're going to have harmony in your picture and it's not going to look weird. Now, I'm taking some of the color, some of the reds and the yellow ochres, and I'm planning on using in the pomegranates, and I'm adding that to the tabletop as well because it's a glossy, kind of like a varnished wood table, and it's going to reflect some of those colors. So I might as well get them down now before I get too far. And there's not a lot of tabletop showing, so it's not going to take a lot of time, nowhere near how long the background took, and you just want to get the colors in. Now, when you're using solvent, another thing that I found was helpful was to take a tiny jar. I have this tiny little, it looks like a canning jar, but it's probably about the size of a shot glass. And I put a few cotton balls in the bottom of that, and I poured in my odorless mineral spirits. And that gave me kind of an area to wipe off the solvent so that I didn't get too much on my brush. And it helps you control. Because if you get too much solvent on your brush, you end up kind of diluting it so much that you have to go in and add more. It almost washes it away, and you don't want to do that because it's just more work and more waste. So why bother doing that? Now again, I'm layering up over the diluted solvent so that I can build a richness of color here, and I'm using the same colors as I did before. Now, I don't wait a long time to let this dry. I think that could actually be even a little damp as I'm going over it. Probably for best results, you want to let it dry completely, or you might get some texture, meaning like you might color onto a wet area and it might like dissolve your pencil as you're coloring and give you a really dark line, but I really didn't have a problem with that. So just probably best practice is to let it completely dry, although I didn't here and it was fine. So I just wanted to put it out there. I don't typically do a whole painting in colored pencil. I typically use colored pencil as like a layer over marker or watercolor. So people that work in colored pencil primarily would offer better advice for completing a painting all in colored pencil. So I definitely urge you to check out channels like Lacquery Fine Art if you want more colored pencil training, because she's got some really nice tutorials there. Then she's, she does them start to finish in colored pencil, and it would give you a good idea. Now for the pomegranate, you might not have caught it, but I took that white pencil. The white is kind of weak in this set, I'm gonna tell you here. I took that white pencil and I put the bright highlight in the middle, and I used that almost to just kind of like seal the paper down, really, so that the other colors didn't stick on top, because the white is not really that bright, but it will act as a resist when I use it in this fashion, almost like burnishing. So I'm layering up yellow ochre, a little bit of a bright, almost like cadmium yellow, some nice bright red, and I am just getting all the colors I see. I saw a little bit of like a pale light lime green at the top, kind of near the stem, and I'm using some brown to define around the stem. Now these pencils have they have a dryness, they're really great for layering, and they sharpen to a nice point. So I can go in and I can add detail, as you can see, over those 3 layers of pencil, and it's going to grab just fine. So if you've looked for a pencil that has a strong lead that you can sharpen to a fine point that don't break, these Koh-i-Noor polycolors are really nice for that. So they're not very expensive either. They run about $1 a pencil, and they are available open stock. So if you bought a set and you use one up, you can replace it. I'll go into a lot of that stuff in the review on Monday, but I know that these pencils will appeal to some folks. I prefer a creamier, waxier, more opaque pencil myself because of the way I like to work, typically in a mixed media fashion. But these worked really well for doing a piece start to finish in color pencil, especially on the Stonehenge paper, which kind of surprised me because it's quite a smooth paper. It's like a printmaking paper. It worked really well for this, and I didn't think I'd be able to layer up too much because the surface was so smooth. It also worked really well in a smooth coloring book, so I thought that was pretty interesting interesting. Now I am using a Prismacolor white here because that like waxy soft pencil is going to stick on top of pretty much anything else. So I did go in with that, and I find that with most color pencil sets that are not Prismacolor, I need to go into the white Prismacolor because it's just so opaque and it just really pops against all those other kind of drier, harder pencils. So it's definitely not a bad investment if you do work with another brand of pencils, because I know Prismacolors break and they can be, you know, hard to layer on top of, and you know, they have some drawbacks, but their white and black is really fantastic to add to another set of pencils that you may prefer the working qualities of. Now for the shadow here, I'm using black, I'm using red, and I'm using this kind of Bordeaux purple color, and that's giving me a nice rich shadow to kind of give the pomegranate some form. I'm adding it in the kind of the crevice of the stem, as well as the cast shadow of the stem. It's just helping build that roundness and giving it some weight. And you want to kind of keep that in mind as you're working. Now, when I apply the solvent this time, I'm kind of tapping so I don't get rid of all my lines. I want to just keep a lot of that texture, but just kind of smooth out some of the pencil. And you can always go back in with more pencil, so don't feel like you're stuck if you get rid of too much texture. Now here I am defining the seeds on the cut piece of pomegranate, and I just kind of sketched this in by looking at a photo. I'll try to remember to link that photo down below in the video description. I believe it was from Pexels, and I'm just sketching in the seeds, and I'm leaving some of the areas plain, which would be the like membranes between the seeds. And again, using the electric eraser to go in and clean up areas. That electric eraser was only like $5 at Jerry's Artorama, not expensive, comes with a bunch of refills, and I'm still on my first one, and it's just so great for erasing color pencil as you're working and lightening up areas and highlighting. So it's a great investment if you end up wanting to do a lot of color pencil work. I find that it doesn't seem to bother the paper too much underneath either, so that's kind of nice. Now I was debating whether I wanted to go seed by seed or just kind of work the whole thing at once, and I'm a big fan of just working a whole area at once and not going like piece by piece, although I did the background all at once and then I did the pomegranate all at once. But, you know I see a lot of colored pencil artists start at one side of the paper and just kind of work across and like detail as they go. And that's fine, but I think you need to start with a really strong drawing beforehand. Like I kind of go in a little bit looser with my sketch and refine as I go. So if you're going in that approach, it does kind of help to work the whole picture at once, I think. But there's all sorts of different thoughts to that. I think that if you're tracing a photograph so you know that everything's accurate, or you're drawing on a scrap piece of paper and then transferring your drawing so you know that everything's all worked out and accurate and detailed, that you're fine to, kind of detail as you go. But I prefer to work the whole thing at once if I can. And that's what I'm doing here with these seeds. I kind of threw all the yellow centers in, then I threw all the red on the edges. Now I'm adding in some of the solvent to soften those colors, and I'm dragging some of that color around into the pith so it's not bright white, because it really wouldn't be bright white. And now I'm going in with that Prismacolor, and I am putting in those bright white highlights and that kind of like that white skin in between the seeds. Now I'm deepening the color with a nice sharp red pencil. I like that these don't wear down very easily. I haven't tried them on a sanded paper yet, but I think they would work really well on that. And of course they would wear down quicker on a sanded paper, but I don't really feel like I need them on this. I feel like they blended out really well, and I was able to get enough pigment down, and I guess I really wouldn't see much of a benefit to using these on a sanded paper. Whereas when I did the bird last week in colored pencil on the sanded paper, I was using those Cezanne pencils that aren't quite as pigmented. They really kind of needed those layers and layers of pigment to really look finished. And I don't think you need to layer these up quite as much. I wouldn't say they're as pigmented as Prismacolor or as Polychromos, but they're pretty good. They're a drier pencil. They feel an awful lot like the Derwent Studios. If you like that, or the Derwent artists, then I think you'd enjoy these pencils as well. Adding in some colors to the leaves. I'm starting with a lime green, a little bit of yellow. I'm going in with like a sap green color. And honestly, I was getting pretty bored with this painting at this point, so I did kind of rush it. And I don't think my drawing of the leaves was all that accurate when I started. I probably should have spent a little more time on those. Instead, they were kind of like an afterthought. They were a nice complementary color contrast to the red fruit. And so I wanted them in there, but I should have spent a little more time drawing. Or I guess if this is a pretty small painting, if this was larger, then I would have had more room to get in there and put a little more detail on those leaves. But at this point, after that background, I was just like, man, this is taking forever. The whole thing took an hour and 45 minutes. to do this in real time. And it's pretty small. It's like, I think about 6 inches by 9 inches. It's not a very large painting. It might even be smaller than that. So that's why I like to work mixed media. It's definitely a speedier and for me a more enjoyable process because I like to fill in large areas quickly and refine as I go. And with pencils, you're kind of refining the whole way, it seems like, I guess. But yeah, to each his own. You should approach your art however you like to. I do like that I can go in here with a sharp, darker color and I can still keep adding details even after I've, filled an area with color. I love how this dark green is layering up over the lighter greens. That was really nice. I didn't expect it to do that. I thought I'd be kind of in a pickle and not be able to get those darker colors on top, but it worked fine. So give it a try. I think that I would use these, I would sharpen these up and I would use them with my softer pencils to kind of go in and carve in some details because they don't break. And that's a problem I had with the very thin pencils by Prismacolor is that they'd break, they'd just snap on me. Now, what I'm doing in that dish there, I'm mixing up some titanium white, which is a white powder, with some touch-up texture from Brush and Pencil, and I'll link that down below in the video description. And I'm using that for highlights, and that is an archival bright white highlight you can use on top of colored pencil, meaning it's not going to flake off like an acrylic paint, a gouache, or a gel pen might tend to do in the future. So that would be the reason you'd want to get that product if you were concerned that your white highlights done in another medium might flake off. If you're not worried about that, then you can skip it. But I really enjoy that product. I've enjoyed the whole line of Brush and Pencil products. And if you're really into colored pencils, you might like them too. Even if you like to use them for mixed media like I do, you might like them as well. And I'm using that for any of the bright highlights. Now you can also put this down and then gently tone it with your colored pencil. So if you've got an edge that you need to be light green or light yellow, you can go in there with that titanium white and paint it, let it dry, because it's not going to flake off, remember, and then you could gently color over it with your pencils. Softer pencil would be best for that, just so you don't scratch at it, but it's just a nice way to be able to brighten things up if you've gotten stuff a little too dark. I'm adding a little bit more reflection to the table. I'm going over some of those bright highlights with that sap green color on the leaves so it's not too bright, and just kind of refining and putting in any little last minute details. I tend to get a little heavy handed with the highlights, especially when I use that touch up texture, because I always mix up a little too much and I hate to see it go to waste. But so there's another tip there. Don't mix up too much, because once it dries, you really shouldn't add water and reconstitute it, because then it may not be archival again because you've introduced too much water to it. I've done it, but I did get some advice from my friend Lisa over at Lacquerie Fine Art, and she said it's not a good idea to, because it could flake off in the future. So I take her advice because she knows what she's talking about in colored pencils way more than I do. So you always ask an expert. It never hurts to ask when you're curious about something like that. And there you have it. The best part is yet to come when we remove the tape. It's like a magic show, I think, when we take the tape off our painting and we get to see it all finished. I did enjoy this. I like how it came out, even after the tedious background, and I hope you enjoyed this time-lapse version of it. Thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting.